Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as always by Mr. Tucker Hazel, and we're here today to regress the discourse by a decade or more.
That's our job here on the internet. Not enough people are regressing, actively regressing, intentionally regressing
the discourse. That's what we're here to do today. We're here to challenge the idea that video games are art.
Yes.
But we're doing it from a good place. And it's really from a place I've been considering a lot, and I'm curious to talk through and sort of express in a hopefully articulate manner why I think it's actually important and useful to consider games through paradigms that are not just games as art.
Sure.
We've got some interesting comments from our community to get into. I've got a lot of interesting comments in my head to pull out and sort of bounce off your head.
Boing, because I'm certainly not going to go in there.
No. If we did, just rattle around infinitely because it's empty.
Yep.
I'm saying you have an empty head.
Yes, I got that part. Aaron, this is an idea you pitched to me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Under the idea that this is something you've been thinking about but have never really heard talked about on video coverage in articles, the mainstream, quote-unquote, media coverage of art, especially, of video games, since I would say 2010 or so, has been a very hardcore push to have video games as a medium be considered an artistic medium alongside the likes of music and poetry and movies and television.
And literature and everything.
And all of these
visual
things. Arts. And it's certainly something I've found myself gravitating towards as someone who's very passionate about video games as a unique medium. And frankly, the reason I'm so excited to have this conversation is because I've never, and I think this is the purpose of the conversation from your angle, is I've never, and many people have never, considered video games in a way that wasn't art, because the dominant idea is you have to consider them this way because that's what pushes the medium forward, which pushes cultural acceptance. But I don't know if you disagree or not, or where we're going to land on this, but you want to at least try to reframe that discussion, that narrative, just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. We've got some good comments from the community I want to get to, but I want to lay a little bit more groundwork first.
Laying a
little pipe at the start of the video.
Yeah.
Far enough into the video, though, that we don't have to mark the AdSense down. You see what I mean?
No, but it's innuendo.
It's innuendo.
Do you have to demonetize for innuendo?
If you had a thumbnail that was just a black image that said "We're laying pipe in this video," I don't
know.
Well, we'll ask the CEO of YouTube when we meet with them next week.
Leave in the comments below.
Leave us questions to the CEO of YouTube. We're meeting next week.
Yeah.
So I've been working on a couple books for Last One Called, and one of them is a handheld history, and in there we have a really cool opportunity to interview a number of old game creators.
Yeah.
Chip Tanaka is one of them. Chip Tanaka is most famously known for a lot of his compositions for famous Game Boy titles.
Yeah.
His work on SNES, his work designing the Game Boy, sound architecture, the Game Boy camera. He's responsible for a lot of critical Nintendo stuff.
He's the one who did Tanaka's song.
No, that's Totaka.
I know.
That's
thank
you.
Yep.
It's a good joke.
It's a good joke if you know really nerdy Nintendo shit.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's you.
But
you got to deal with all that.
The interesting thing from our interview with him is the way he talks about himself not really as an artist.
Sure.
And you get this same impression from a lot of old people.
Yeah.
And I'm not calling them old. I'm saying they're literally old. They were at the inception of the medium. Yeah. They were here in the NES.
You are
SNES
calling them
era,
old. You're not insulting them by saying that.
That's a perfect way to put it. We also interviewed Yu Suzuki and shared similar sentiments. This idea that they were closer to journeymen, that they were making something for fans. They made something to be sold, and they didn't sort of put their accomplishments up on a pedestal of high art.
Yeah.
And so it just really got me thinking about this old way, this old approach.
Sure.
And it obviously tracks with how games were thought of back in that era. They were for kids.
Yeah.
The NES was literally sold as a toy. I mean, selling games as toys was the way to go for a long time. So the idea that a lot of these old legends of development would think of themselves as toy makers just sort of makes sense.
Yeah. But I'd say even probably someone like Miyamoto would think of himself in that
for sure.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a sentiment that's kind of kicking around in my brain.
Yeah.
You don't really hear that anymore. When you're talking to devs now, like when I interviewed Neil Druckmann,
Mm-hmm.
we're really getting into the artistry of his writing and
well, we want to avoid that word in this video.
Well, that's the interesting thing. It's not that I don't.
We're talking with of his writing.
It's not that I don't think games are art. I think that games are very artful, but I think that there is more to a game than its artistic status.
Okay, sure.
And I think that it is that idea of product and that idea of making something for an audience that is sensible beyond its artistic merit. It has an audience, it has a budget that makes sense. It's a product that serves a purpose, that satisfies people. That is what games are.
Sure.
You know, for as artful as they no doubtedly are, you also can't dispute that they are sold, that they are bought and sold.
Yes.
You know, we're not
I do that quite frequently.
Yeah.
Maybe more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, you know, we're not talking about the freeware space, we're not talking about game jams, we're not talking about any of this largely non-commercial stuff. We're talking about commercial games,
which is the vast majority of video games that are made.
And they are product 100%. You can't deny that. Just as you can't deny the artistry of the medium. But what I think the mistake, in my opinion, of modern games discourse is to look at the games only through the lens of art.
Okay, yeah.
We got a comment here from Scruffy.
Yes. Oh,
that I think would be interesting to read.
Okay,
first.
Let's find this. Boom. All right.
And by the way, almost all Mr. Beast. By the way, almost all of his comments we've abridged because people had a lot of really great thoughts, but we just can't really get through 5 paragraphs to everybody. There's one exception.
Yes. And also, if you are new to watching us and you are watching this video and you want to be a part of our conversations in the future, we have a Discord channel that you can join. We stopped doing plugs at the beginning of the video because I felt like they kind of dominated the start of the video and we didn't want to push it on people. But I feel like if you're, I don't even know, 7 minutes into the video and you hear this, maybe you get a sense of our vibe, you get a sense of our humor.
You like the cut of the jib.
But Scruffy says, and that in trying to quote unquote validate video games to the broader community, I feel like some of what makes video games so unique and distinct is being slightly lost in the process. I think there's something really singular about the culture around video games that separates it. It's super important in a modern media landscape. The definition of art being so nebulous isn't at all helpful.
Yeah, and the reason I like this little bit that I pulled out of what Scruffy was saying was that the reason, in my opinion, we are so vehement and I'm using the royal we, to assert games as art is because that is what was necessary to validate our enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think as players started to enjoy games more because they were widely considered as art. But that was no doubt a necessary step to sort of square the massive commercial relevance of games with the content in them.
Yeah. Well, here's where my mind goes to this. And to be frank, even in your prompt that you sent to the community, talking about trying to put yourself in a mindset that is divorced from the narrative and conversation that has been that games are a form of art, they are an art form, yada yada yada.
Right.
That was your prompt. I didn't think about it. I wanted to have this in the conversation in the moment, and especially reacting to Scruffy, I'm going to take more of the trying to explain or trying to justify why, even though obviously you don't disagree, the games are an art form, why that is where my mind goes and why I think obviously the two are in harmony, but I lean towards art form being the dominant way that I view the medium, and just generally video games in general, is the idea that the validation from labeling games art and matching video games, whether that's through better performance capture that mirrors something like movies, through writing and storytelling that mirrors something like literature, through graphical and artistic design that matches something like painting. Video games definitely, there was a concerted effort over the course of the history to match video games to different art forms to make them appear and come up to the level of things like art. You look at like other mediums of art. But I think where my mind goes for this is I do think that video games are an art form, but I think the problem and the reason why there's a little bit of tension between video games as an art form and other art forms is that we need to change the definition of art to meet video games instead of changing video games to meet the definition of art. Art has never, to this point, to the point of video games, included interactivity. And interactivity is usually what, and the product aspect of it that we're going to be talking about is usually what you could say prevents video games from being art in the traditional sense compared to other mediums. But art is the definition that I think needs to change to match video games and not the other way around.
Well, I mean, Scruffy said something interesting here that I don't really agree with, which is this idea of sort of something being lost.
Yeah.
Scruffy's larger point had a lot to do with interactivity,
Mm-hmm.
as you're raising, but sort of a move towards cinematic gaming as a sort of lesser sort of illustration of what games can accomplish.
Yeah.
I don't really agree with that.
No, I don't either.
And it actually leads to something that another community member, Syscott, said that I want to get to in a second.
Okay.
But, there's so many different ways to express yourself in the medium of games now that I don't really think, or I'll put it this way, I feel like there's a reduction of the conversation in a lot of people's mind that a certain style of game is inherently more artful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether you believe that is a more Naughty Dog style game or a more gameplay driven game, there's a sort of entrenched debate, more simply referred to as story or gameplay, which is a better encapsulation of games as an art form.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a moot question. I don't think it really matters. Part of what I want to interrogate here is, you got a stack of games in front of you.
I do. I have a couple. And I just went through our little library back here and picked out a handful of ones that are traditionally considered either examples of games as an art form, as the way I was talking about matching to other traditional forms of art, or as gameplay as the unique element of game design that makes its own distinct art form.
Yeah.
And I pulled out Journey, I pulled The Last of Us, Katamari, Breath of the Wild, and Tearaway.
And those are really great games. But let's just
these are all great games. I fucking love all these games.
Yeah, I love all these games too.
Yeah.
If you just pick up Katamari is considered to be a very artful game. Intriguingly, Keita Takahashi has been exhibited in the MoMA. I mean, he can walk in traditional high art circles.
Mm-hmm. But he also doesn't consider himself a designer. He considers himself a toy maker or an entertainer or making just basically interactive play. That's his version of what he sees himself as a game designer.
Exactly. And so here's my thing. If I look at Katamari Damacy and I say to you, Tucker, that's not art.
Yeah.
Are you gonna like the game less?
Am I going to like the game less? No. I'm gonna like you less though.
And that's fair. But see, this is where I think the distinction is important to draw in a conversation. I'm not saying that Keita Takahashi's expression in Katamari Damacy, everybody he worked with and his team at Namco were not artists making this game. I guess my contention is that it doesn't matter if this is art or not.
Sure.
And I think that we clutch this idea that games are art very closely.
Yeah.
And we never really relinquish it and wonder what happens if we don't consider games that way.
Well, let's give the moment for you to present where you really want to take this conversation from.
My feeling is that there's nothing wrong with liking a product.
Yeah, sure.
And as a community, we create these artistic hierarchies. And I'm speaking to the in-group, but also our videos get like 100 views. So we're talking to the in-group.
Yeah.
You, audience member, you, Tucker Hazel, me, Abram Buhner, are going to hold up this copy of Katamari Damacy and say, this is more artful, more interesting than Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, to most people, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is infinitesimally more interesting than Katamari Damacy.
Yeah.
Games...
Now, which Modern Warfare 3 are we talking about?
Games exist well beyond the paradigm of art.
They exist in the context of all ways.
They do. I was going to bring her up at some point.
Okay.
But I think
the artistic hierarchy of different kinds of games, budget sizes, tone, gameplay style,
I think it's wrong. I
would agree with that.
I don't think that there's much merit in it. I think that the hierarchies we make are flawed. And we're recording this video at an interesting time because the indie publisher Humble Games just liquidated its staff.
Yeah.
Now, Humble is trying to say, hey, we're going to release their upcoming games and then restructure.
It's very difficult with that much staff.
It's pretty obvious that at minimum they are a shell of what they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a period right now where we evangelize, again as an in-group, indie over everything.
Mm-hmm.
What a beautiful new type of gameplay experience.
Yeah.
You look at the games of May, right? Whether you're talking Animal World, Big Kitty Little City,
Yeah.
Crypt Master, any of the 20 really lauded games that came out during that time. We all want to say, look at what interesting pieces of art they are.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is a lot of those game developers are never going to get to work again
mm-hmm.
because their games got overshadowed,
Yeah.
The reality is, and there's been more stories being published about this in the recent months, I think sort of in response to that sort of community sentiment, indie devs just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Indie publishers are in a state of massive instability.
Yeah.
But all we look at is indie as the future because it's a creative expression that we like.
Yeah.
And I think that that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think we need to think about the place that games inhabit as product because that's important.
Mm.
There's no point in being artistically interesting if your future is on this project and it fails.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I think that is true in the capitalistic economic reality that we live in and also through the lens of someone who has an artistic vision usually doesn't just have one artistic vision and they would like to be able to iterate and try different things and express their art over a course of many works. But I disagree in that. I've lost myself in my own thing. In that, if a game fails commercially and is not successful enough to make its budget back and continue to fund the next project, I do not think that means it failed artistically.
And I don't either.
Okay.
But here,
I thought that's what you just said.
Well, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter at a certain point. If you're creatively successful, if you can't make your next game, you can't contribute anything more to the industry.
Yeah.
Your voice is gone.
I guess that's true. But I also think that is just how things work in the world.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that... I think that a single game that has a great design idea and is out there doesn't do very well, but that is out. It contributes. People played it. Even if the designer doesn't get to make another game, one game is more than no game.
Well, let me put it this way. Let's read Seth Scott's comment here.
Seth Scott says, I feel like so much focus of this conversation is on AAA.
We'll get to that.
That it is not even looking at some of the best artistic expression of the medium. Indie games right now have so much love and care and passion in them. Video games are indeed an art because of the passion of the developer and the director that comes into the picture when you get to see their artistic mindset behind the decisions that are out there. Even if the games get utilized in the worst ways for corporations, the handprint of many different degrees of passion is still there. You just have to look for it.
The reason I like what Scott's saying is because, to me, there's no doubt about the artistic success of the medium anymore.
Sure.
There's really nothing that you can't accomplish these days.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find success making any sort of game. I mean, look at what Strange Scaffold just did with Clickholder.
Yeah.
The number of different types of games, we made a whole video about this. Mm-hmm. The number of different types of niche, interesting games that have succeeded in 2024 is testament to the fact that whether you as a player like the type of game being made now more than what was dominating 20 years ago, the reality is this is a better landscape for games as an artistic medium than ever before.
Yeah.
You can make games for flat displays, you can make games for VR, you can make AR, you can make XR mixes, you can make...
What the fuck is XR?
XR is like...
That's like a phone. I had an iPhone XR at one point.
It's all different fucking permutations of like the real world and the digital world. But you can make big games. You can work on a AAA project. You can make an indie game, any genre.
You can make a little kid. You can make a big city. It's all over the place.
You can make a game where you click a banana. You can make a game where you're jumping.
Where a guy's making you click. You guys in the chair making you click.
Exactly. You can do anything.
Yeah.
And games have such a large economic footprint, such a large cultural footprint. You look at the number of films and TV shows that feel so clearly inspired by The Last of Us's storytelling and art direction. I feel like the artistic merit of games has been asserted a million times over. Mm-hmm. So the reason I raise my concern about the way we talk about games is because I really don't care that any of these indie games are showing me a new artistic idea, because I know you can make any artistic idea. Mm-hmm. What I'm a lot more impressed by, and what to me is a lot more meaningful than any of that, is Astrobot.
Okay.
PlayStation, which is in a position of great precarity as a business, as a company that makes product, they're in a very precarious position.
with the ballooning budgets of their biggest games.
And their failure to control that is pushing people out of the industry.
Yeah.
It's shuttering studios. People are going to go find different careers. They're going to leave games.
Mm-hmm.
But with Astrobot, they found a way to have a 3-year development cycle, to have 60 people make a AAA game that is beautiful. It's captivating the minds of all the people who have played it early. Everybody's looking forward to it. It's going to be a really, really, really big success.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very shrewd product.
Sure.
And I think that that's what we need to focus on more as we talk about games.
Yeah.
How can we make games a more sustainable place to continue to assert the artistic truth of the medium? I'm not denying the artistic truth. I'm saying it's not the important thing to be worried about anymore.
At the moment, I'm starting to see what you're saying. I think we should have drilled in on this a little bit earlier in the video, but we got there in the end, and so that's all that really matters. And who knows how long this is going to go.
Yeah.
But I absolutely do agree in terms of the sustainability of the medium and especially the sustainability of the workforce that we've seen be thrown into such turmoil always, but especially over the course of the last 2 years. So many people have left the industry because from the smallest teams to the biggest teams, it is very difficult to keep a game studio funded, have a product reach an audience based on its budget and marketing, and be successful enough to fund that next game.
Yeah.
Because that economic reality is something that is to the developer is everything.
Yeah.
The economic reality of this is their job. They want to be able to pay their healthcare. They want to be able to feed their family. They want to be able to pay their rent and continue working on games. But the economic reality is what controls all of that. If they are no longer able to feed their family because they are working on a game, they're not going to work on a game anymore, because in 99% of cases, the game is not more important than their healthcare, their family, their house, all of that. And we have seen so much turmoil in this area that because of so many games being made and because of the ballooning budgets of the biggest games, the sustainability is very, very shaky at the moment. And so I see what you're saying in terms of games as an economic product.
Yeah.
That is where the medium is at its most worried right now. That's where the biggest issues lie.
And I do understand that there's a period of time where proving the artistic merit was most important.
I just want to point out something.
Yeah.
The height of the Vita case is exactly the same as the width of the PS3 case.
That's very compelling. You think they did that on purpose? They couldn't have possibly done that on purpose.
I think they had to have. Yeah, because I think it's the dimensions, right? I think this has the same dimensions, and so I think they just.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like it's just a shrunken down.
Exactly. But they match the height to the width, so it's scaled down by, I don't know, is that a third? Maybe?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's compelling. I mean, it's a compelling observation either way.
Yeah. Artistry.
I want to think about. I don't remember what I was going to say, so I'm going to say this instead.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I want to think about Hi-Fi Rush for a second.
Yeah.
No, I remember what I was going to say. I'm going to say that first.
Great. All right. Then we'll return to Hi-Fi Rush.
There was a point in time when it was more important to talk about games as an artistic item.
Yeah.
Something that needed to be, it's worthy to be proven. And I understand that completely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now we can talk about games much more freely in an academic context. We can talk about them in so many contexts.
Absolutely.
Because of the work that was done a decade ago, 15 years ago to set that foundation.
Yeah. And it needed to happen to make sure that we were able to have those kind of conversations and having them be taken seriously.
Exactly.
I would contend that work is still being done.
Yeah.
There are not video game history courses in schools like there are art history and film history courses. Video games are still such a new thing that. And this is a big part of why I am on the push for video games as an art form and respecting their culture and learning about their history and things, because I do think that we're still only 60% of the way there.
And that's fair.
But 60% is a lot better than 5% or whatever it was when I was born.
And at risk of this video catching traction, which I don't think it will, but if it does, I mean, my whole career is exactly what you're saying.
Exactly.
It's about furthering the culture of games through books.
At risk of this getting traction, I want to admit that I make books.
But I'm not coming at this from a perspective of somebody who would disregard the important work that's still needing to be done for preservation, for information accessibility, for education, for all of that.
Yeah.
But we're at a period now where I look at Hi-Fi Rush.
Mm-hmm. Finally, back to Hi-Fi Rush.
It's a lauded game as what Xbox needed. You know, it was a big first-party new IP, colorful game. wacky gameplay idea, mixing character action with rhythm game.
Yeah.
It's really cool. The game failed.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can say 100% that Microsoft's intervention and inability to manage its studios played a big role in the shuttering of Tango Gameworks.
Yeah.
And their financial coffers should have been enough to buoy that game in that studio so they can try again.
Well, guess what? They were. They have enough money to have done that, but they didn't.
and that blame belongs on them.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's also important to remember the fact that while we head scratch the closure of Tango and we get rightfully angry at Microsoft, the reality I think is also that as a product, I don't know how strong Hi-Fi Rush is.
Sure.
They gave it no marketing time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
They launched it in a very peculiar way.
Yeah.
It's a very niche gameplay idea. There's more things to consider when it comes to the success of a game than just how creative the idea is. And I think we get lost in that sometimes. Sure. And I think that there's a lot of good that can come out of advocating for games as product, even beyond the economic scale of things. Yeah. Think about accessibility. The From Software difficulty debate, to me, is on an abstracted level, game as art or game as product, in my opinion. The game as art group says, hey, Miyazaki and From Software have this vision, you're asking them to compromise the vision. Yeah. I look at that and I say, well, at a certain point, Elden Ring is a product. Yeah. People are coming to buy Elden Ring. Yeah. A good product, in my opinion, is going to support the needs of as many customers as possible.
Yeah. About 25 million customers, like Elden Ring.
But what if it could be 35 million?
Absolutely, of course.
What if it was a little bit easier? Yeah. And I'm not just saying that I'm not saying that to compromise the vision of Miyazaki. I'm saying that because if you think about a game as a product, you want as many people to engage with that and get use out of it as possible. We can talk about the emotional value of games. We can talk about the mechanical intrigue, but I think at a certain point it is all use. I'm using my game console to use a piece of software. Yeah. And so I want more people to use games. I want more people who have physical disabilities, who are just maybe not as skilled. Yeah. Across the needs for accessibility spans a big spectrum of needs, right? Mm-hmm. If we think about games more as product, and we start thinking about the end user, what can we give the end user to make this experience more accessible? Sure. You can start giving them difficulty options. You can start giving them... There's a lot of people shitting on the idea as like a patent, I think, from Sony of being able to like skip a gameplay section. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like on like a system level or whatever it was. That's really cool. Yeah. And that allows more people to engage with the thing being made. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you want the artistry of games to be as widely spread and ubiquitous as possible, ubiquitously understood, the games need to be better products.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think is so interesting about the current state the games are in. Yeah. Is that we've reached the point of largely the cultural acceptance of games as an art form. The potential of the medium, I think, has, over the last 10 years especially, really started to clamber up in terms of different scales of people and different genres being invented and different business models and things like that. Yeah. Like, the games have, I think, more quietly evolved a lot over the last 10 years than I think people really give them credit for. The narrative around the change to games of the last 10 years is just look how many battle passes there are and how many microtransactions and DLC and things. But I do think that the reality of the breadth of games goes a lot deeper than that. The iceberg is the DLC and microtransactions and battle passes is the tip of the iceberg, and then everything else from VR to AR to indie teams to the biggest games to high production value, all that is the iceberg underneath. And what I think is so fascinating is that the medium does have the space, whether in this space it is successful or not, it has the space to include anyone on that spectrum between I want to make my artistic game freeware, it's just an expression, it's not going to make any money, to I'm going to release it commercially, I don't really care if it doesn't make a lot of money, I wanted to do this, all the way to we're making this as a product. We're ripping on something that's popular. We know that this is just going to get a bunch of free money. It's not going to cost us very much. It like a lot of mobile game advertisement type of games are exactly that, or the sort of copy and paste visual novel hentai games on the eShop where they just like rename it and then sell it again for $7.
Interesting phenomenon.
Like the breadth of the medium covers everything, and for me that makes it so interesting as someone clued into this to look at a game and parse out what elements of this are the product reality of the game?
Yeah.
What elements of this are the artistic reality of the game? And then be able to play with that and analyze and compare. But for me, not really make too much of a judgment on I want a game to be this or that or fall anywhere on this spectrum. I don't play the $5 hentai games that are reskin renames, and I don't play.
Not on your public account.
Not that you know of, and not that I'll admit. And I don't play. I frankly don't play like Freebird games. Yeah. I'm not really into itch games. So my range is slightly limited, but most games fall in this sort of not extremes of this spectrum. So that's why I like video games so much, is because that everything can exist and we can talk about all of it. But the games that find their most success or the best balance are in the middle and do make some concessions, whether that's through accessibility, whether that's through testing. What's the word for having people play testing, things like that, like taking in that kind of feedback and tweaking it, even if it's not exactly what you want, but you want people to enjoy it.
Yeah,
there is a balance of these things. I find that really fascinating.
Let's go to the phones.
A ring-a-ding-ding.
Let's go to Ricoli.
Ricoli. All right. Ricoli says, there are so many games that focus on literally just
Careful. Try again.
No, Ricoli, not Nico. Yeah.
Try again.
There are so many games that focus on literally just nickeling and diming us with microtransactions and loot boxes that mostly focus on just draining our wallets for every cent we've got, with so many focusing more on charging us than entertaining us. Art's for entertainment, not just making money. If games were undeniably art in the same way other media are, or at least seriously considered art, you'd have everyone mostly prioritizing artistic value and integrity with them first as a majority, and prioritizing monetary value second in the minority, to where, it couldn't get in the way of expression artistically. And I wish it was that way, but it's actually the exact opposite, aside from very rare exceptions. I wish it wasn't, because you can still have something be financially viable and still have artistry to it. But it's sad that it seems like most literally just see dollar signs with it and nothing else, as companies like Activision and EA have made abundantly and aggressively clear at this point.
I think this is a very interesting comment.
Yeah.
Because I don't agree with it almost at all.
No, neither do I.
But there's two claims in here that Ricoli makes that I think are compelling. One is that everybody is concerned about money.
Yeah.
And parentheses derogatory.
Yes, correct.
And then two, art's for entertainment, not just making money. I think those are both very interesting and very provocative statements that Ricoli's making.
Yeah.
The second to me is quite compelling because art's for entertainment, not for making money. Now, I would caution myself or you, but I won't stop you from trying to define art.
Sure.
But what I would say is that I would not define art by saying that art is for entertainment.
Yeah.
There's commercial art that is very much considered entertainment, and I think that games are commercial art, the same way that movies are commercial art.
The same way that I would say basically everything is.
And this is where it gets very interesting.
Most songs are written to sell copies.
And a lot of songs are written to get big on TikTok.
Yes.
And a lot of track lists are assembled in a certain way to get into Rap Caviar on Spotify. If that doesn't make any sense to you, it doesn't matter.
And most movies are made to go to theaters. And frankly, most paintings are made to be sold to someone.
And even if you are a real, serious, high-end artist, you're still making money on your work, but it's in different ways.
Yeah.
The point is... I
Patreon.
I think that I sell a very particular type of art on Patreon. I think that what Ricoli is raising here is a sort of flaw in the logic of games as art.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the forces of business and art, if we were to treat them as separate entities, are opposed. I think they're almost one and the same.
Yeah. I don't think they are. I think they can be. And I think that mostly that comes down to production realities of the creatives versus the producers and where that balance ends up coming in. I remember, I think Mortal Kombat 11 or something, there was, NetherRealm didn't really want to do this, but WB wanted to have everything be a skin that you could buy for $20 and locking things behind paywalls. And that was not the team's intention, not from the creatives. There are certainly examples where business reality from a production reality of the people that are spending money producing the game can put their foot down and say, you have to change this
100%.
to reflect. But I think that, again, it's about that harmony. And it's not a balance that is easy at all to obtain. And it's one that's rarely obtained. But you can't make a game without it being funded. And you can't get funded unless the people giving you the money are certain that they're going to get their money back through their investment, through return on investment, through selling copies and promises down the road. And I like learning about the medium because I get to learn about where this balance comes in and where concessions are made. But I think that, I just completely disagree with what Rick said, because there's almost no examples of art that are made external to the economic realities of feeding the artist because they need to make money to continue their life, or solely economic reality of we are just making this for a product. We're just trying to nickel and dime you. I think there's actually basically no examples on either of those extremes.
What I would say is this. EA and Activision are aggressively and abundantly concerned with money, but you know who else is? AGI Numa.
Yeah. He's a producer. And guess what? His games have sold a lot of copies.
And when he was making Tears of the Kingdom, there's no doubt that he was looking at the financial success of this game as they were working on the design document for Tears of the Kingdom.
Of course.
And
exactly. Instead of just be like, hey, I want to make this specific kind of game, what did people like about Breath of the Wild? What set it apart from the previous Zelda games that made it so influential and distinct? Let's lean into those. And obviously it didn't sell as many copies, but try to recapture that energy by leaning into what the audience liked about it.
Yeah, and the way that they were talking in interviews, him and Fujibayashi, were talking about like the way that social media influenced the Ultra Hand mechanic and various things like. And this is maybe conspiratorial thinking, but I bet there's a lot of people on that development team that are like, this idea is not like we don't as just an pure artistic expression. We don't really like this for our high
quite possible,
But it was a shrewd and good decision.
Yeah,
and I think that we need to recognize, and this is again where the product comes in, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Tears of the Kingdom is a very strong product because it has something for classic Zelda fans, it's something for modern Zelda fans. It has things that are going to go viral on social media, and it has a company behind it, Nintendo, that not only prioritizes finding the fun and things like a toy maker, but said, hey, look, this toy we made, The Legend of Zelda Breath of Tears of the Kingdom, we spent a long time on, so we're charging you $10 more.
Yeah,
and they did. Because that was them saying, we made a product that's worth this much and you're going to buy it for that much.
And also, interestingly enough, I think does kind of what we dream of from the biggest scale games is smart asset utilization.
Exactly.
Of not building a totally new Hyrule, not building a totally new engine, building off the bricks that were laid before. That is a very smart business move. Tears of the Kingdom is probably still the most expensive game they've ever made, if not
Prime 4 is probably the only one's going to beat
it. But it would have been way more expensive to set it in a totally different Hyrule with a new engine and new art style and everything. They made concessions where it was smart to lead to the best product at the end of the day. It might have been a more interesting artistic expression if it had a totally new art style and was in a totally different Hyrule that was from the ground up built to have the depths and sky islands and everything. But then Tears of the Kingdom is a totally different game that maybe doesn't appeal to people the same way because people like Breath of the Wild so much, and the idea of expanding it and adding the depths and retooling the characters and the world. That's what made people like that game so much. It made it sell so many copies.
Yeah.
These are all, they're artistic conversations to have, but ultimately from the production level standpoint of why they greenlight this game, it's because Fujibayashi and Aonuma come to them and say, we can reutilize this map. We don't have to spend 2 years of development building a new map.
Right.
We can reutilize it, save a little bit of time there, and put the effort elsewhere.
Exactly. And this is, again, it's an Astrobot style thing. And where I think you really well introduced that nuance about their artistic conversations to have about Tears of the Kingdom. The reality is there's very few artistic decisions in Tears of the Kingdom that I like more than the artistic decisions in Breath of the Wild. But I look at Tears of the Kingdom and I say, man, that was a very shrewd product.
Sure, yeah.
And through that lens, it was very successful. And I think we need to assess games that way. But there's another risk in this conversation, because I think that what I'm suggesting is not far away from the I will only buy a game that's 60 FPS, 4K
Mm-hmm.
crowd. The sort of consumer advocacy, the faux consumer advocacy, YouTubers, grifters, tech perverts, all of these people. And I'm not associating myself with them.
No.
Because I think there's a difference between
I do. Quite frequently.
There's a difference between looking at a game through the lens of product as I'm suggesting and
Mhm.
looking at a game as a tick box of things that must
Sure.
be hit. You know, gotta be this frame rate, gotta be this resolution, gotta have this much
Yeah.
content per square inch.
Mhm.
That's not really what I'm advocating that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting about how this conversation how your thoughts on this conversation have evolved through my eyes
Yeah.
is I didn't really know that you
Yeah.
had been thinking about all of this.
Yeah.
This had come from your work, it had come from these interviews that had been percolating in your mind. We hadn't really talked about it.
Yeah.
We had talked about the artistic expression of games, business reality. We've talked a lot about just video games in general.
For sure.
I remember, it might have been like late last year or something, having a conversation where I was expressing that for me, I think that modern games are stronger in
Yeah.
my experience, and also I would contend in their design and in
Yeah.
different things because they're able to build upon what came before. And I would also say that on the opposite side of that coin, I largely do see older games as failing in certain areas because they don't have that same learning from the experience just because they came out before. And you said something to me
Yeah.
about how video games aren't like washing machines. They're not like toasters.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Because a new toaster is
Yeah.
more than likely going to be more energy efficient. It's
Yeah.
going to have a better build quality. The things like those kind of technology are pretty much objective improvements because they improve on hardware in that way. But you were I don't remember the exact thing you were saying, but it was something about how video games aren't
I
washing
remember it.
machines because they don't do that, and there are things from older games that are superior, and it's not just making it look better and run faster that makes it better. And of course, I agree with that sentiment. But can you remind me what that was? Because
You're remembering it right.
I'm remembering it right. Is that a good thing to bring in this conversation, or am I derailing us? Okay.
No, I've actually been thinking about this because what it was a tweet I put out.
Okay.
And it had something to do with gaming reviews discourse.
Mhm.
And how I felt. It might have been when that person's fucking insane Hellblade 2 review spreadsheet was going
this
around.
wasn't as long ago as I thought.
No, it wasn't. And I said the way we hold games back is by looking at them through this lens of we got to tick all these boxes for a game to be good. And this is where I think this is just a nuanced conversation, and I'm still trying to figure out my own perspective on this. But I feel like when I was speaking in that way, I was partially falling into the trap that I feel like exists of thinking about games only as art.
Sure. Yeah.
And I also think that it would be incorrect with the way I'm now thinking about the industry and games to disagree with your premise through this lens, which is games now are better products than games of the past.
Yeah.
Games of the past to me are more interesting artistically often than games of the present.
Yeah.
But the reason I approach this conversation at all is because I care a lot about games at a high level.
Yeah.
I care about my own experience, of course, but I care about them at a very high level.
Mhm.
And I feel like at a very high level, I have to take myself out of the conversation to a certain point and say, hey, look, if I had to make a hierarchy of issues that I see with gaming right now, as somebody who loves games personally, professionally, artistically, critically, commercially, all these different ways, what's if I had to make that big bucket, what's at the top of the
chum bucket.
funnel? If you had to make the chum bucket, what's at the top of the chum bucket?
Yeah.
Top of the chum bucket. It's actually that hand that sits on the handle.
Oh.
But
I'm not up my SpongeBob lore.
But I think it is this point about product and the importance to think about games this way.
Yeah.
And I think you're good at doing that.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Because you're always thinking, and I think we do this a lot without realizing it. You know, when we're talking about Nintendo's release calendar, when we're talking about all of these larger things, it's not really an artistic conversation.
No.
It's a conversation about how these products reflect this company's commercial calendar.
Sure, yeah.
And that's important to do. And it's important that a game like Pikmin 4 has all these new features and dumbs down mechanics.
Yeah.
Because Pikmin 4 is a better product than the last two Pikmin games put together. Last 5 Pikmin games put together. Let's be technical. Last 6. We'll count 3 Deluxe in there also.
Christ.
So it's important that I admit to you and to the camera that I feel like I too am part of this.
Sure.
Games as art is most important.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we indict this line of thinking and think about what else we should be considering.
I like games as art, and they indicted me.
Because at a certain point, we are not in positions of power as consumers.
God, no. I've got 1,000 subscribers.
But we are consumers of product. And so we need to think through that lens as well.
Yeah, definitely. You want to point it to something else?
Let's go back to the phones.
Okay. Ring-a-ding-ding.
For the last comment. Oh, wait, no,
there's a couple more.
The last one is from Stephen, which is labeled as witty. And we'll get to that at the end. Bless you. Okay. I don't like that you did that.
Are we going to read this one?
Yeah. This is the last comment we have. This is the only unabridged comment.
Yes.
It comes from Adam Hurd. It's very long, so pack a lunch.
All right. You know what? I'm going to move the computer in front of me. We're getting comfortable.
Click it.
Yes.
Click it or ticket. I'm going to be driving, and you're going to be entertaining me. You're almost like my radio right now.
Yeah.
And Adam Hurd is just...
I'm like the art for art's sake, and you're like the money or whatever.
There's a deer in the road.
Oh, God. All right. Adam Hurd says, "Oh, damn. Games as a product makes me so sad because that's definitionally what the direction... That's definitely the direction the industry has moved in. Not only that, but it's also seemingly what quote-unquote gamers want." Do we want to break this down bit by bit? So
yes, but let's go a little bit
further.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to make sure we cover some of these things.
Yeah, I think we should stop after the next chunk of text.
That's fine. Yeah, I know what a paragraph is. All the discourse behind games journalism, and particularly reviews over the last few years, has ultimately got me to believe that quote-unquote gamers don't want reviews to be like film or music critique, but like reviews for a mop. Does the game work? Is it a good mop? Am I going to get my money's worth from the mop's lifespan? And
this is why I was saying about my washing machine thing.
Yes.
Because I was making the same criticism that Adam was making, but as I've been thinking about it, I feel like it's the wrong paradigm.
Sure.
You had a really interesting idea that we're going to unpack in a different conversation about how a game almost has two lives.
Oh, yeah.
It has a life...
Oh, that's one of my best thoughts.
It's a great thought. So we won't get too far into it right now, but the idea is essentially... when a game is first released, the critical consensus around it is almost a knee-jerk opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, as more people play it, it settles, the hype is gone, the marketing cycle is gone, the game just becomes the thing, it takes on a different life.
Yeah.
That idea that you raised really struck me.
Oh.
Because I think that...
I didn't think we've talked about it, so you just kind of struck you just internally.
It did. Because that first review should be... Is it a good mop, in my opinion?
Sure.
Because again, there's multiple lives to games.
Mm-hmm.
5 years after the release of Hi-Fi Rush, it doesn't really matter that game is the last game Tango put out. It doesn't really matter how Microsoft released it.
That's definitely true, and especially when you look back at so many games from the past, we don't talk about games from Acclaim or Midway or Sega games before they stopped making consoles under the auspices of, oh man, these were the games that contributed to the downfall of these companies. They are the games. The economic reality fades over time in conversation. And frankly, the artistic reality and the cultural reality and the impact of a game raises over time, because it's a lot harder to put yourself in the mindset of the economic reality of a time that was not what the current moment you're living in. And especially for us, talking about games from like the 90s, 80s, and 90s, we weren't alive for that, so it's even more difficult. But yes.
And the reason this is important because this is, again, my contention is that games are only product. My contention is that games are art and product. Mm-hmm. And there's a time to talk about both.
Yeah.
When you buy a game for $70, even though I think games should cost more than $70, that's a lot of money.
How much should Clickable cost?
$450.
Xavier, get on it.
But it's a lot of money. Even, honestly, a $24.99 indie game is a lot of money. I could spend that to go and get takeout instead of cooking one night, right? So
you could get two people's meals for almost that much.
Yeah. It's money is scarce.
Yeah.
It's a hard economy.
It's a scarce resource.
So the first review should do that. And who's been a really influential critic in my way of thinking recently? You can do this. Think about it. It's a movie critic.
Oh, Grace Randolph?
Grace Randolph.
Oh, yeah, because we watch a lot of movie math.
Grace Randolph, people who do not know, runs a channel called Beyond the Trailer, and Grace talks about doing what she calls putting your business hat on.
Yes. Oh, I've been doing a lot of that recently.
And she often talks about movies from the position of business.
Yeah.
And how do these actors, how does this pacing, how does trailers, has an end credit scene, has all this stuff, get people into the theater? And I sit there and I cross my arms and say, well, Grace, it doesn't matter because the thing is good for these artistic reasons. But the reality is, to use a recent example, you know, Mad Max Furiosa, Mad Max Saga was the actual title of the movie. I loved it.
Now are you dead naming Furiosa the movie?
I guess so. Mad Max Furiosa. I saw that Thursday night and I loved it.
Yeah, great movie.
But it limped across the line. It did better on...
Well, it limped across a line.
Yeah, and the reality is George Miller might never make another Mad Max movie.
No way! No way!
and if Furiosa had maybe been a little bit shorter, if it maybe had a slightly different cast, if the structure was a little bit different, if the title was different, if the trailers were different, that movie could have done a lot better. We could be looking at the green lighting of Mad Max Wasteland already. Yes. But it wasn't a good product.
Exactly.
And because of that, are you really going to ask somebody to spend $18 on a premium format ticket and concessions and go out of their way to see the movie right then? No, I mean, a couple years down the line, we will reappropriate Mad Max Furiosa. We'll do all this revisionism about the film. It will be seen as a masterpiece in a couple years that I see it as now. Yeah. And there's a time for that. But the reality that you have to admit is that if the reviews for Furiosa were very good, sure, so this is not a great example, but that opening weekend review should you go see the movie right now? Yeah. And I think that there's a space for different things. And there's a role to looking at a product, as a piece of art as a product first. Because that is important to getting more of it. It's important to exposing other people to it. Mm-hmm. There's no point in making something great if you can't share it with people. Mm-hmm. And if it's too inaccessible, you're not going to share it with that many people. Mm-hmm. Again, go back to Pikmin 4. Yeah. I love that Pikmin 4 is more accessible, not because it's necessarily my preferred way to play Pikmin, but because all these new people love Pikmin now too. We can share in that and get more of it. Yeah. So I think that what Adam is raising is my old way of thinking. Sure. But my new way of thinking is that we need to think about the product first. We need to think about the art later.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the best reality for all of this, and it's a very difficult reality, as we're saying, balance is very hard to strike. 100%. But is obviously a balance between these things. When a game comes out, when a movie comes out, it is important to talk about its quality. And for us, we don't review our movies, and especially not on Quest, under the auspices of how much money did this make, what were the trailers like. Some of them are so old or don't have trailers online that it's not even relevant it can't be relevant to our conversation. But I agree, especially as a game is coming out, it is placed into the economic reality of who funded this, what was the development team like, did people leave partway through, did it take a long time to come out, what were the trailers like, did it get delayed? These are all things that impact your experience of a game when it comes out. I mean, if a game that you're excited for gets delayed 3 times and then the first trailer looks good and then it comes out and it's a little bit worse than you would think that they spent 4 years on it and that kind of underwhelming you, that impacts your experience of the art just as a fact. Yeah. It's impossible to escape that economic reality. And so I disagree with a lot of what Adam is saying here because I do think that is it a good mop mentality is, as you're saying, for it being a product, is something that is important to the experience. At the beginning, a lot of people want to make sure that, because I also think that is it a good mop isn't a bad thing. I think that oh, okay, yeah, all right. People want their mop to be good. Yeah. And people want their game to run well. I mean, I don't particularly care about frame rate. I'm not a Digital Foundry type guy. Frankly, I watch their videos and I can't even see what they're talking about. But I think that there is not only a space for that, but even though it doesn't impact me, the reason why I say is it a good mop is not a bad thing is because if I was the type of person who wanted my game to run at 60 frames per second and a game came out and it didn't run at 60 frames per second, that would hurt my enjoyment of the game, and I would care to listen or read a review that told me if it was going to do that or not to impact my buying decision. And these are all important things, and I think it is short-sighted or myopic to lay a moral criticism against, like, this is how reviews should be, this is how they shouldn't be, because games are a wide enough medium at this point to where there are people who care about the mop quality, and there are people who care about the build, the artistic build of the mop.
Well, put you this way. I do want to make a moral judgment. I want to look ill upon the people that get like pissed off if the frame rate's wrong or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
And because because Adam does something interesting in this thing here. Mr. Beast has.
Okay, we gotta stop doing that because that's not gonna be relevant. Like most people know what we're talking about.
Well, they'll have to go find out. It's a fun scavenger hunt now. What do we mean? Gamers.
Yeah, he puts gamers in quotes twice.
And this is the thing. What really I would think Adam should do is do capital G gamers, because the gamer is a typical type of is an archetypal type of person, and I think that there's
a proper noun gamers.
And I think that there's a difference between looking at a game through the lens of product and looking at the game through what is an unrealistic paradigm. The paradigm of every game needs to run at this resolution. Yeah. Every game needs to be this many hours long. Every game needs to contain this quota of diversity or lack thereof diversity, or it's woke and we're going to put it in the fucking Steam curation list or whatever. I think that you can look at games as product through a positive lens. Yeah. Now, what those people are doing are looking at games as product. They're just doing it wrong.
I agree. Yeah.
And so I think that that's an important distinction.
Looking at it in a harmful way. I just don't think it's harmful to want them off.
I can't give it a handshake.
Because here's the thing. My arm's so sore.
Because here's the thing. What I'm trying to advocate for is the idea that not only is there a harmful way to think about games as product, but there's a positive way to think about games as product. Yeah. And we have to make that distinction.
Yeah. And
should we go back to the phones?
Well, I also quickly...
go ahead.
The reason I stopped after the first sentence is because I'm going to read it again here, because I read it a while ago, and I don't want you guys to forget what I'm replying to. The first sentence of what Adam said is what caught my eye and I wanted to respond to. Yeah. He says, "Oh, damn. Games as a product makes me so sad, because that's definitely the direction the industry has moved in. Not only that, but it's also seemingly what gamers want." Yeah. And I think this is only true. And I don't have research to back this up, and so Adam could certainly be correct.
I do know what you're saying.
I don't even need to say that. I don't think it's true. I think it's only true that gamers want games as product, and that the industry has trended in games as product direction, has trended and evolved in that direction. Yeah. I think it's only true. I think those things are only true if you are in the bubble of people that knows games history, that knows the opinions of people outside of yourself, that you're focusing on the ways of the good and the bad and your opinion and the evolution and all these things. I think once the complexity of all these things starts to enter your mind, I think the negatives seep in a lot stronger, because I just don't think it's true that most games or most designers, most companies focus on their games as a product in a negative way. I think many of them do. I think that many of them don't. I think that many of them fall in the middle. I think the reality is it's a spectrum where EA puts loot boxes in Battlefront 2, and that hurts the industry and it causes chaos. I think there's games that like Xavier Nelson releases clickholding for $2.69, and people are like, please let me give you more money. Yeah, you are a cool guy and an artist. This was a fun game, and I want to give you more money. The industry is a spectrum of these things, and whether it is Sony making Spider-Man 2 for $250 million, oh sure, yeah, but still paying their workers right and not forcing unlawful practice or whatever, that is as a product, and Spider-Man is popular, and they want to sell 20 million copies, and it's based on the engine of the other ones, and there are these business decisions being made, but the team members worked really hard on it, and they're proud of the way that it uses the SSD and the story that they're telling about overcoming the problems that other people have around you. Like, there are these things that I just don't think it's accurate to say that especially the modern games industry is more games as a product than it was before, because there were so many cheap cash grabbing games back in the day, and there are so many we're just making a Galaga knockoff back in the day because it's an easy way to get an arcade in the arcades and make a bunch of money off of it. Games as a product is something that has always existed, and I think the economic realities have just become more clear as things have evolved, as more businesses have become involved, as we, as you and I, and as Adam, and as people on the internet have been in the industry longer and learned about more things. The current negative aspects, which there are many, I think weigh very heavily. But I just don't think it's accurate to say that this is what the industry has moved in, or that this is what gamers want, because most people don't think of games in the same way.
I agree with you completely, and I mean it's important to note that if anything, games are less so product than they used to be. What is an arcade machine if not a product? And it goes back to this interview that I was. And
in my opinion, I just want to say for arcade machines, I think arcade machines are so aggressively product that they hurt my end experience. Yeah. I would like to play Pac-Man with 200 lives, and that would make the game more enjoyable to me. When I am kicked back to the beginning of the first level because the game was designed to, you only put in a quarter and you only get 2 lives or whatever, that makes me like the game less. And that is aggressively a product.
In this interview with Yu Suzuki, he's speaking about the idea of designing his arcade games around a 3-minute loop. And that 3-minute loop includes the time it takes for somebody to play and expend the amount of time they get from their coin, and then either to put a new coin in or have the next person take over the cabinet.
Sure.
3 minutes to have somebody start the game, play the game, and either pay again or have somebody else pay in their place. That was the design of arcade games.
Absolutely.
When you look at the move to home consoles, it's not really different. It was just the business model was different.
Yeah.
The product minded business model was, okay, now you want that arcade game, but you don't have to be nickel and dime for it. Well, now come and buy an expensive Intellivision, ColecoVision, get a really good version of Donkey Kong. Go buy an Atari 2600 so you can get Space Invaders at home. That's games with product again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was games with product when NES games that were super short were designed to be fucking impossibly hard.
Yeah.
So you had to play them more to get your money was worth. That's grinding.
Yeah.
That's not different than padding out a AAA open world game now.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, from the economic reality of that, games were more expensive back in the day, and so obviously the idea of them as a money-making product was not necessarily more prevalent or less prevalent. I don't have the research to make that claim, but it was prevalent when fucking Burger Time on television a cartridge cost you $85 in 1982 money. Yeah. Oh, whatever, I'm not getting my years right, and that would be like
far off.
That would be like $190 in today's money.
Exactly.
For fucking Burger Time. I'm making a generalization, but you're telling me that wasn't a product thought process of that?
You're not even making a generalization. Yeah. I mean, when you really study the history of games, what you're describing is just the reality.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason we get responses like what Adam begins with, what Reekley was saying, or what Siscott said, and sort of the longer message was that people are pushing back against a current economic model.
Absolutely.
They're not pushing back against the current state of games or a different state of games. Mm-hmm. This has always been the case.
Yeah.
The reality is the business model is just different now. It's microtransactions, other things. It's not that it's more overt. There's nothing more overt than the arcade machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's that we now have the benefit of 45 years of games to play completely removed from the product context that they were placed in. Exactly the point about the two different realities of games.
Yeah, and also we have the context of things have changed since it wasn't always this way, and therefore because it's new, because what's happening now isn't great. I don't love that there are a bunch of battle passes and microtransactions and things. That's not a positive element of the industry in my opinion, but it is different from what came before.
100%.
And so but I'm sure people weren't happy paying exorbitant prices for a cartridge game on the television or whatever. And so there were people complaining about the product realities back in the day. But that was also that was the only frame of reference. There was no frame of reference. It's not like, oh, this is worse than what came before. And now I'm not going to say if it's better or worse now than it was before, but it is different. And you can have an opinion and make that claim. But it wasn't possible to make that claim before.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Adam's been on hold for a while. Pick the phone back up. Return to the phones.
We've just been really.
You know what we've been doing? We've been doing. I don't really watch gaming YouTube. I don't really listen to podcasts. I just watch big chunks of of the Hasanabe broadcast put on YouTube.
Yeah.
We're doing a Hassan right now. We're getting a little bit into a video. We're pausing the video. We're talking about it for 20 minutes. We're resuming the video. We're going to do the same thing again.
And honestly, not a bad way to do a video.
It's not a bad way to do a video.
Continuing at Adam Hurd at Condid. Period.
It's what I should have done with the fucking Sakamoto Emio reaction. I should have just paused it.
Yeah, it's true. But you also should have mixed it better.
I didn't realize.
Yes. Continuing, Adam says, I know it's controversial, but when I talk about and get sad about the quote-unquote PlayStation House style, it's because I can see the third-person cinematic action template in action whenever I see a brand new trailer for whatever Sony's AAA offering happens to be. It's because Sony are treating games as a product and not an art form. They're capitalizing on a template for their games that sells, and I can see the seams. I know many millions of people love these titles, and that's fine, but all it does is make me sad when I see The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima and Spider-Man 2, what I would consider the MCUification of gaming, sat next to what I would consider gaming's artistic peaks, no longer being explored, like Journey or Shadow of the Colossus, which I have back there, but we didn't grab it. Shadow of the Colossus. The art is gone, and quote-unquote gamers, again, don't care. Because ultimately, all these games, these MCU movies, they work perfectly fine for what they are.
Let's pause again.
Boom! Spacebar hit with a loud clack.
Can I say something crazy? I think that Sony's games are too artful and not enough product-minded.
Okay, interesting.
Not product-minded enough. Because, and here's the thing, right? I was thinking about Last of Us Part 2. Last of Us Part 2 is, in my opinion, pound for pound, probably the greatest artistic achievement in the history of games. It's a game that's deeply significant to me, personally, professionally. I love that game.
It was interestingly enough, it's also something that is very important for BLB's history, because the day we upload our Last of Us Part 2 review is what we consider the anniversary.
True.
We've done some fucking videos and there was like some nonsense, but Last of Us Part 2 and BLB are
100%.
The DNA is linked inextricably.
But I don't really think Last of Us Part 2 is a very good product.
Sure.
And I think that even panned out in the sales numbers. I mean, it sold half of what Last of Us 1 sold.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at that game, I think the game is too long.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the game is too realistic.
Sure.
In reality, think about how much time Naughty Dog poured into that game.
Yeah.
To me, the art of that is amazing.
Yeah.
But in reality, if the animations for Ellie assassinating somebody weren't the same, if the Naughty Dog animators didn't have to look at gore, if they didn't have to crunch, they didn't have to do all this stuff, if the reflections a little bit worse, if the physics on the third extension cord you throw aren't quite that good, that doesn't change the game.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, because what we're talking about is the commitment to the realism of this game is the artistic vision of
100%.
Top team at Naughty Dog, and because of that, it balloons the budget and balloons the amount of time that it goes into it. And if those things were, if the artistic vision was compromised, the artistic vision would be compromised. But as a product, it would have taken less time to make. It would have cost less money to make, and would it have really hurt the game at the end of the day? Is what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And Last of Us Part 1 is an even clearer example of this.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of speaking with not only Neil Druckmann about Last of Us as a whole, but the two lead directors of Last of Us Part 1 for Lock-On.
Cool.
And I really love speaking with them and hearing about their commitment to fidelity and the reason that the work they put into every lighting source was so important and why it's such an artistic achievement.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's a really bad product. Because what is Last of Us Part 1 really offering? You know? And this is the thing about Sony. I think they're in this position where we'll put it to you this way, they were in this position at the end of PS4 generation, into PS5, where they were just saying, look, you guys need as much time as you need.
Yeah.
You take it, you spend as much money as you want to spend.
Yeah.
You go make these massive games, but they cost too much. They didn't sell enough.
Where's my copy? Days Gone.
Oh fuck!
We had Days Gone. I put it back on the shelf. But no, you're absolutely right. Dreams and Days Gone are probably the two biggest examples, and Last Guardian. Those are three big games that took a long time to make.
Yeah.
That obviously, if the business realities had been put more forcefully on all of these teams, they wouldn't have taken as long to come out. They wouldn't have. I mean, all three of those games contributed to either the ending of the creation studio or the these are on shaky ground. Media Molecule and Bend are kind of next on the chopping block.
And again, Media Molecule is another team that we've worked with very closely. For Lock-On, we did a whole special on Dreams. I think that Dreams is one of the most amazing sets of artistic tools ever made. But again,
it's not a great product.
And this
put
is
it on
point.
PC. Allow people to export your things.
Yeah, and it's not that what I'm saying is I just want them to churn shit out. But what I'm saying is, you got to find the balance.
Oh, I thought you were going for a handshake.
I'll give you a handshake
Okay,
for the
sure,
balance. Again, if Last of Us Part 2, I think the last act of Last of Us Part 2, where Ellie is going on her
Revenge mission.
Many people see as extraneous.
Yeah.
I see as important to the narrative of the game. But I also think you could tell a version of The Last of Us that cut that down significantly.
Sure.
And that would have saved a lot of time. Would have saved a lot of budget. Again, texture's a little bit worse. Game a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
The artistry of the dialogue, the music, the art direction, the gunplay, the sound design, all of this is still going to shine through. But you're going to have a better product.
Yeah.
And the reason you want this is so Naughty Dog can make more games.
Yeah.
And so
they've been put in a really weird position now.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they made a game. They canceled a major project because these. Yeah. I actually think that a lot of what's happening now to them is that business reality stuff of we don't think that this Last of Us Online multiplayer game is going to sell enough copies or be sticky enough, and so there goes all the work. And there probably would have been some great Naughty Dog quality artistic expression in there, but the business reality of the production company of Sony Interactive Entertainment put the boot down on that.
Here's the sad thing. If they hadn't been working on this Last of Us multiplayer game, I think there's a really good chance that this year we'd be playing a new game for Naughty Dog.
Absolutely. 100%. Undoubtedly. Yeah, we could have seen it last year, frankly.
and again, there's no doubt that Jim Ryan.
Yes.
What Jim Ryan's leadership was doing at the end of his tenure was bad.
Yeah.
And was too business minded.
Yeah.
But there's a middle ground to be found. And that middle ground is found with games like Astro. It's found with the various hero initiatives around the planet.
Sure.
It's found in even a game like Concord.
Yeah.
Even if I think that development site, that might actually not be a bad example.
Yeah.
It's a bad example.
Yeah.
Take that back. Scratch it from the record.
But that reverse it.
You find the middle ground. I'm not saying you go all the way into product. Again, there's a balance of art and product.
Yeah.
But I would disagree with the idea that Adam is positing that just because there's a house style that's product.
Yes, and this is where I want to again disagree with Adam Hart.
Yeah.
It's becoming a classic bit at this point.
Yeah.
Because I read this and I pretty strongly disagree with it. Not because I don't think it's obvious that Sony's style of games from their major studios is samey. I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, and I'm feeling, coming off a couple weeks ago playing Days Gone, and those games being released a year apart, I'm like, these are similar. I like both games.
Yeah.
I love Days Gone. I love Horizon. I love Spider-Man. I love God of War. I love Last of Us. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
But
you are that guy.
Let me straighten my tie and coif my hair. The reason why I don't think it is derogatorily apparent is because I think that you can levy close to that same criticism at most games, and I don't think that Sony is specifically bad at it. And I know that Adam would probably also, and I think fairly, levy the same criticism at Ubisoft for reutilizing their same templates and the towers and the collectibles and all of that, and the EA for Madden and Activision for Call of Duty, and then I can say, well, when companies back in the day were making like Capcom was making a new version of Street Fighter every year, and it's mostly the same game, 2 extra characters added, buy the new cabinet again. That's very much in that same vein. Yeah. When there were 6 Mega Man games on the same console, that's not a template. That is aggressively template-defying and product-defying, and let's get this out 1 year later and not change very much. These things have always existed. And same what I was saying about like the sameness of lots of genres. So many shmup games and falling block puzzle games, and it's easy to make a 2D platformer, so let's rip off Mario, and then let's rip off Pokemon, and let's rip off, like, these things have always existed. And I just don't think that Sony is the right place to be levying those criticisms for being too product-minded, when that's, in reality, that's just the history of the medium. And I also think that saying that the art is gone because the artistic peaks no longer being explored like Journey and Shadow of the Colossus, I don't think that's true either, because I think that Journey and Shadow of the Colossus, okay, Sony publishes, well, actually both of them. You're right, Sony isn't publishing the more experimental games like this in the last couple of years, and they certainly were during the PS4, but I don't think that means that is gone. I think it just means it isn't with Sony anymore, because I've played, and we've talked about, 5 or 6 games this year that I would contend are some of the most artistically interesting games of all time. I think Click Holding's actually one of those. Even though I played that game less than a week ago, I would say that that Infinite Craft is one of those. Just a totally different approach to the artistic expression of a video game. Like I played Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and it like melted my mind. Just because Journey isn't being published by Sony anymore. Actually, Annapurna is now the publisher of Journey. But I just go to Annapurna for that, and I get my other stuff from Sony.
Well, the other thing is Annapurna makes the same, and most of what Annapurna does, and they're diversifying more, but there's a style of Annapurna.
Oh, sure. Yeah, totally.
And there's nothing wrong with cultivating a style as a publisher. Yeah. That's the other thing. I mean, I think that Sony could stand to diversify their catalog more, and they are right now, but by a tenfold.
I'm that guy.
100%. But also, I don't really think, again, it goes back to, if we think that Sony's being product minded, then they're being really bad at their job, because they're getting the product out like every 7 years. Yeah. The studios are taking like 5 to 7 years to make a game. That's not a very good product.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think here's the problem is when people I'm projecting a little bit, but when someone like Adam says that Sony's big budget cinematic style is too product minded, I think it's focusing on the fact that the games cost a lot of money to make, and not that. And where I would say that being product minded is not making a game that takes 7 years and $300 million.
Yeah, and if you're going to, you have to be Rockstar, and you have to spend $1 billion, and you have to spend even longer, but you make it back in a weekend. Like
absolutely,
it's not just a budget thing. It's a matching of expectations thing.
Absolutely.
And so again, that's why I was praising Astrobot before, because Astrobot's a way through. It's a way through for PlayStation. It's a middle ground. I think that's great. Yeah. Now Adam sort of elaborates in the next paragraph.
Spider-Man. You want to talk about Spider-Man? Okay,
I don't really want to talk about Spider-Man, to be honest. I think what we should do is we should go back to That's My Problem. Okay. Because what Adam...
We know what Adam's problem is.
It's what he's saying in his paragraphs is good, but it's elaborating on the MCU idea. But we're just going to go to the end. Sure. This is like when Hassan skips through parts of the video.
Great. Adam says...
my hero.
That's my problem. I spent years arguing for games as an art form, but games themselves don't want to be considered alongside movies or music. They don't want to be included in conversations about politics, because then people won't buy their product. They're not interested in making something that actually stands up and says anything important at all, because that's at the risk of upsetting people. They'd much rather just pump out the next Fast and Furious title and watch the masses mindlessly view their quote-unquote content. Games aren't art. They're doom-scrolling clips from Ted Lasso on TikTok at 3 a.m. while you're on the toilet. They're content. Content designed to sell a product. Buy this code. Enjoy the content. Don't complain. And now I'm going to bed sad. Thanks, Abram.
Now here's the thing. This again, Adam, I love you. I love when you submit.
Yeah.
And we're unique. We're uniquely picking on you, but we know it's because we're doing it because you can take it.
Yeah.
And what you're providing is a very, very compelling response. It's the reason. It's actually the most compelling response. I don't like to pick a favorite children amongst the BLB community, but Adam, you are the only person that did not get abridged. But that's because you had so much rich stuff in here.
Yes.
Let me suggest something to you. You're being too general.
Yeah.
I've spent years arguing for games as art form, but games themselves don't want to be considered alongside movies and music.
What does that mean?
Here's my feeling. One of the biggest film releases of the year so far.
Yeah.
And I mean biggest in like a cultural sense, not in terms of the money and grossing, but it's Alex Garland's Civil War.
Sure.
Biggest movie from A24. A24, hot kid on the block. Now it's Neon, but that's a different conversation. Yeah. Civil War, whether you like it or not, is almost objectively about as little as possible. Mm-hmm. It strays away from, as you're saying here, standing up and saying anything important at the risk of upsetting people. Yeah. It's literally what Civil War did. It's what Avengers Civil War did. Mm-hmm. It's what the biggest movies in Hollywood do. Mm-hmm. The biggest albums of the year often have little substance to them.
Yeah. And of course, across all of this, there are exceptions. And there's Kendrick Lamar shitting on specifically Drake, and that's one of the biggest albums of the year. Obviously, that's saying something and making a commentary. Yeah. But there are exceptions to this. But I
have to dig. You have to dig, and you can't look at the top 1-2%, the biggest, and ascribe a whole medium to that. If you did that, then movies and music are as, if not more, meaningless than games.
Yeah.
Say what you want about a slate of AAA titles
or literature. I mean, I don't actually. You know what? I can't really make this claim, but I can assume it. That like the highest selling books aren't the ones making the most biting critical commentary. They're the ones that tell a fun story with interesting characters that doesn't need to have.
It's a movie about that.
Yeah. What? Huh?
It's called
American Fiction.
American Fiction.
Yeah.
I'm blind in the title.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just don't. I think that this is really what I push back against.
Yeah.
More than anything, it's this. It's this idea that there are these hierarchies and ways.
Yeah.
Of expression that are better or worse.
Yeah.
And you can change the terms Adam's using, and I think it describes how people speak about indie games.
Mm-hmm.
When people speak about indie games as though indie games are a series or a genre, when they're really an economic model.
Yeah.
And
they're a product.
They're a product. And we have to recognize that, and we have to look deeper. I think we have to look deeper. And obviously what Adam can't articulate what he's saying the way we can articulate.
He's not on the video.
In an hour and a half long video. And he wasn't invited. We didn't tell him we were going to do this.
We did. That's the point of the prompt.
Well, that's actually a good point.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that Adam would articulate this a little bit differently if we're having a conversation.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that
they
this...
were more back and forth instead of back and back and back and back.
But I just think that ultimately we need to shift the lens. We need to not even look at product as content as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
I agree with that. Yeah.
Because I think the word content is harmful because often in AI contexts, it's in a lot of contexts that I think are bad.
Mm-hmm.
But things have contents. The contents of Shadow of the Colossus, Adam views as the peak of the games industry. Yeah. Taking the S off is important, and I think words have real power, and I think that content holds connotations that are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's easy to just say we're turning games into content, and content is bad, and we need to return meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But the meaning is there.
Yeah.
And I just don't like the idea that we speak in generalities, that we prioritize one thing over another, or that we ascribe content to things maybe it's not supposed to be, or slop, or whatever word you want to use.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think this is the kind of generalization that I find kind of frustrating. I don't find it as frustrating coming from Adam, someone that I know is very knowledgeable and that I've talked to about games that I have an appreciation for. If I saw someone on Twitter say this exact thing, it would make me mad. It doesn't make me as mad because it's coming from Adam and we're having a conversation about it, but there's a lot of things that I think are so overgeneralizing here that I think that generalization is harmful. And I think that not that Adam saying this is harmful to the industry. I think it's harmful to Adam because he went to bed sad after this. And I think that if Adam, you're probably watching this. We've been talking about you for 40 minutes, but I think that hopefully through this video we've been able to elucidate a little bit, that's a fucking great word.
That's great.
That this kind of view of the industry is not reflective of the reality of how diverse video games are now, how many people are making them, how many different sides of product versus art there are, and I agree with the trying to avoid using content or slop or things like that or MCUification or doom scrolling as these things as they can certainly be used in negative ways, but as categorically negatives, I think is inaccurate, and I think is myopic a little bit because if you say that a Fast and Furious movie or a game that doesn't have something important to say is just slop or is just doom scrolling or is just content, I think that it runs the risk of oversimplifying the work that does go into creating those things. We have a video concept that we're working on that people don't appreciate AAA development as much as we think that they should. And the generalization of something like that games themselves don't want to be considered alongside movies or music. What is that? I don't think that has any basis in anything, because what does that mean? Do you mean that the in-group of gamers don't think that games are above or below or whatever, that the people making games see themselves as above or below or whatever, or that, and I think that this is more the reality of what he's saying in what you just broke down, is that because there are so many high-profile games that aren't more explicitly artistic visions in the way that they sacrifice product, because as we've been talking about, there is this balance that in the in-group conversation that trends towards preferring something that is lower budget and isn't from EA, isn't from Activision, isn't from those companies. That is, again, as we were saying, that's not games. That is those games, and that is EA being product minded with the way that they make their Madden games. But, and I know you're not saying that Madden games. He's not saying that Madden games should have some political commentary or whatever. But that there's a place for all these things, and the reason why so many of these games that don't push the boundaries artistically are successful is because most people on the planet want what they are interested in to be more comfortable and to not be completely outside of the boundaries of what they're used to. And I think that there's just a place for all this stuff. I think that saying that games aren't interested in saying something poignant or whatever, or saying something controversial because people won't buy their product. I just don't think that is an accurate reflection of the state of the modern industry.
If you were to say to me, if you were just a passerby on the street, or you're somebody I respect, if you're Hassan, right, and you come to me and say, "Hey, Abram, games aren't art," mm-hmm. and you made me admit it, mm-hmm. what would happen? And this is I think, an interesting thing that Adam was touching on, that you were touching on, this idea that it's okay that some games aren't deeply meaningful, whatever. I'm still going to have fun playing Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, whether you allow it to be deemed as art or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of the problem that we have as an in-group talking about games, that we still feel like we need that validation. Sure. And I understand wanting it, and I understand the importance of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I struggle with this constantly.
Yeah. My thing is, it's okay to just like something because it's fun and it also has no meaning. That's fine. Yeah. A lot of Nintendo's games have no meaning, but they're fun, and joy is something that is in short supply often. Sure. So what's wrong with saying that this is a really good toy? I'm allowed to play with toys. Yeah. I'm an adult. I pay my rent. I cook my food. I go to the gym. I get my sleep. I be a good person.
Well, 4 or 5 of those are true. Guess which one's not?
I don't make my bed. I'm not allowed to just have a little fun. Yeah. And this is, I think, part of the thing. There's no reason to go to bed sad. Yeah. Because there's no reason on a personal level to get invested in this. Mm. If you're having fun with the game, or the game is prompting, it's making you think, it's making you wonder, it's making it fun, it's making you sad, it's making you feel something, that's kind of good enough in my opinion. Mm. And I think that we need to stop clutching this idea of games as art so tightly. Sure. We need to understand that some games are going to prioritize their political context, their social context more. And those are the games that then we can uplift as illustrations of the artistic side of the medium. But it's also fine to say, hey, I'm really excited to play Black Ops 6. Black Ops 6. Yeah. Cold War already happened. I already played that one. And I can go in knowing that the deep ideological flaws of that game, the problems of that game, but just play it. Yeah. And maybe to some people, especially people that are even further to the left than I am, which is a fun conversation that can be had separately, but that's wrong. And you need to consume things ethically, and you need to just participate with certain kinds of art that have more meaning than others. Yeah. But I just need to save that energy and use it somewhere else. Sure. And I don't think there's a problem with saying, I love my Nintendo games, they have no meaning. They are art in the sense that they have music and visuals and all that shit. But I just like them because they're entertainment and they're fun, and I need something relaxing to do for 2 hours before I go to bed. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. And so whether you take that approach, whether you take the approach that it's important that games say something and I want to fight for that, whether you take the approach that games are mostly product, no matter how you approach games, you need to appreciate all the dimensions of them. Yeah. You need to be a little bit less precious about things. Sure. You need to not be so concerned about how other people are judging how you spend your time. Mm-hmm. And you need to be understanding of the economic context of games and the reason games are the way they are. Because if you don't, you are hurting the medium. Yeah. And it's not even directed at Adam anymore. If you are not buying games at full price, you're hurting the medium. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing all these things, if you're just buying games as a subscription, you're hurting the medium. If no matter what you're doing, you can view any action as deleterious to the medium.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You can
anything. There's a view out there of any of these things being hurtful.
It's all bad. You can say that buying games at full price and getting people to convincing publishers to make the games more expensive is hurtful to the medium.
Yeah.
You can have any view you want. I don't really give a fuck. The main thing I want people to take away from this video is that games are a product and that's never going to change, and people's lives are at stake.
Mm-hmm.
When a studio gets shut down, those people are totally fucked.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how clever their mechanical idea was. And until we accept that and we preach that, I think we're going to have a hard time getting games to a better place because they're in a precarious position right now.
Yeah. We can close out with the witty comment from Steven, who says, "Who was it that said movies are a handshake between art and commerce? Well, video games is that, but commerce is crushing that other hand. Though the current state of the industry makes me think prioritizations of commerce is healthy, but not inevitable."
Is not healthy, but is inevitable.
Oh, sometimes I like to project a little bit. Let's redo that sentence. Though the current state of the industry makes me think that the prioritizations of commerce is not healthy, but is inevitable. A reflection of this stage of capitalism and media habits.
That's a good ending point because, to me, a lot of people are receiving that handshake and having their hand crushed by commerce, but going, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt. The reality is that handshake is there, and it's not bad that it's there. Or maybe it is bad, but it is there.
Yeah.
And I think that Steven ultimately puts it as, we live in the context of all that was before, and whatever Kamala Harris says, Harris for president, I'm voting for Harris. The point is to have a brat summer. You should play the games you like.
Jesus Christ.
You should Skibidi Toilet.
No. See, you're trying to make our video a better product rather than
I am. Phantom Tax, AMP House, Astral, Chained Together.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video when it's
Elden Ring Marathon.
When it's chopped into 147 little bits.
Wojak.
Because we're so product minded now. Wojak.
Dollar Shave Club. Black Rifle Coffee.
What's that fucking game? What's the fucking...
Raid Shadow
Legends. Yeah.
That game where that's not fake. It's a mobile game where you're running down a corridor and you can multiply the number of troops you have to shoot the Cyclops.
Yeah, look, product.
BetterHelp.
Just... Beep, 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 beep. This just in. Coming in hot over the wire.
We'll put this at the very end because it's funny.
Yeah.
If we're talking about BetterHelp. And then, hide this. You can do the bit still.
I'll do the bit.
We got a comment.
Hot off the presses.
It's actually, we did. Actually, the comment wasn't late. We started early.
Yes.
So it's really our fault, not Tanner's.
Yeah. But Tanner Dykstra of Our House fame.
And BLB fame.
True. But I think that this is his first video game conversation submission. So we need to make sure we read this.
We do. I'm going to read it in its entirety, I guess, because I didn't have time to edit it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's fine. He deserves it.
Also, he could smother me with a pillow if I didn't. You know what I mean?
It's true. Yeah. Which Adam and Scruffy
could, but Scruffy would have to find me.
Yeah. All right. This is what Tanner says.
And also, it's like Scruffy would have to get past a motion detector.
Do you want me to read it?
And I, Tanner's already in the bed with me, so it'd be easier for him to strangle me.
Here's what Tanner says. He says, "Well, I was just so taken with this prompt that I had to weigh in. I have a pretty liberal view of what quote-unquote art is in the first place, but I want to throw my hat in the ring. Please excuse my naivete for the subject matter. For reference, the very little time I've spent playing games in the last several weeks/months has been EA College Football 25, which is true." He says, "But funny enough, I think starting with that recent release is a good example to focus my thoughts. When I think of College Football 25, do I think of it as art? No, not especially. But I think it pretty clearly comes from a business decision internally made at EA/NCAA, only being made possible because of recent legislation around student athletes and NIL deals." That's very true. "There is no singular auteur behind EA College Football 25. It was quite literally concocted in a lab to appeal to as many 25-year-old men with disposable income as possible. It's a product, a business move made to bump EA's bottom line into the black. Many such cases, and I think there's a case to be made that many AAA games or even blockbuster films fall into a similar category. Not a case I would make, but I digress. So, if games aren't art, did people advocating for this position just waste a decade of their lives screaming into the ether? I think it's still a worthwhile endeavor, if only to make games more respected in general. After all, artists, or at least people who call themselves artists, aren't all that venerated in our culture anyway." That's a very interesting point. If game developers can't get respect as artists, maybe they can get some as product developers.
This is a really interesting comment that we should have paused, but I'm going to open it back up. Because Tanner makes an interesting point here. He says some things I don't agree with. This idea that there's no auteur behind the game, bring down its artistic quality, is interesting because I don't agree with it, but it's also intriguing because the games we ascribe as really helping to push the notion of art forward in the medium is like Hideo Kojima's work. And so a tour sort of looms large over all commercial art forms. Sure. It sort of gives us a way to say like, oh, this is the painter of the work. And not having that does cast a different shadow, but also like a lot of artful games don't have an auteur behind them. But I think that the larger point Tanner's making here about, so if games aren't art, people advocating for this position just waste a decade of their lives screaming into the ether. It's interesting because, again, it just speaks to what I'm trying to say, which is we all need to relax a little bit. And him playing NCAA, and it's not called NCAA anymore. What is it called?
Oh, it's EA Sports College Football 25.
Yeah, that's great. Like, that's a great game. And as he's saying, it's the result of these business decisions, but it's really not that different than, like, I don't know. What's an example of a game studio getting the rights to a franchise back and making an entry in it?
Any Star Wars game from not Ubisoft.
Yeah. So the Star Wars is a great example. Star Wars license lapses, another team gets to jump in there, they make something. Games are just a product of decisions like this. It's just sometimes it's the curtain is pulled further back when it's a game with real college athletes
and real legislation
and real sports rules and all this shit. Like, it makes more obvious, but what he's saying that he wouldn't level the same sort of productness against other AAA games, I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, that's all games. Yeah. All games, there's a lot of copyright work going into protecting that IP, making sure everything's above the board.
Yeah.
I'm sure that like a lot of the remaking an old game has a ton of this tape to go through. Yeah. So it's just the way of things. As he says, there are many such cases. And so I think EA football sports game, whatever it's called, is a great example of how. What are we going to do? Are we going to look down our noses at this game? No, it's offering something actually very interesting. It's offering us essentially an RPG experience. It's offering a lot that nothing else in the industry is offering.
Sure.
And you've been playing it a little bit.
I played a little bit of it.
It pushed your boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
And it exposed you to something new. And it used the medium of games in a unique way. It's as much art as it is product.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, to end on what Tanner was initially expressing, and he and I sort of share this view, and I think you follow this as well, of the idea of something only being art if it passes a specific threshold of it has a message that is important socially, or it has a unique art style, or it is unlike things around it. I think is certainly not the descriptor of art that I subscribe to. And we were talking a little bit about the fact that we sometimes present this as binary, as it is either art or it is a product. And obviously that is not actually true in the reflection of the production of these games. But I think it's also just harmful to think of it in that binary, and that if something isn't different enough from the things that either came before or are coming out around it, it is then product and therefore is worse. I think that for me, my approach to video games as an art form is an incredibly relaxed and loose thing that I think makes video games even more exciting. Is that as an art form, video games have the space, and frankly, as a set of products, video games have the space to include one-person games that are built outside of the economic realities as you can get.
Right.
And they can be EA Sports College Football 25. That is, and this is we're gonna go a lot more into this in our you don't appreciate AAA game development video, but there is a lot of work that go. I mean, as I was playing the game, I was thinking a lot about the artistic and product realities of that game, and I want to make sure that I bring this up in that video, which I hope we do soon, of the amount of fucking work that goes into making sure that you get every every college's intro, right? The Huskers do this animation where they jump up and slap the horseshoe before they run out on the field. I'm like, okay, number one, I didn't even know they did that, but they did the research, and they made sure that was lovingly recreated to bring the emotions out in that moment, and the fact that the different fields are modeled differently, and that the way the crowds wear different colored shirts is reflective of like the experience. Like, there's real work that goes into that, and in my opinion, that's artistry. That is a dedication to craft. That is that, and then that goes overlooked because it's football, and because there's not a director whose name we recognize, and because it has a realistic art style, and not a expressive art style.
That's still an art style,
but it's still an art style, and it is an art style that reflects the emotions of playing that game, and trying to recreate the real life experience of football, which is something that so many people have passion for. I did not enjoy my time playing Sparks College Football 25 because I don't know how to play football. It was very confusing to me.
Yeah.
But playing that game helped me to stitch together even closer the idea of games as an art form and games as a product, because that game, I think more overtly and certainly more culturally, people would think of it more as a product, but every game swings both ways.
Exactly. Every game does swing both ways.
That came out wrong.
And also, it's the reason I raised Call of Duty, too, right? I mean, Call of Duty has really bad politics. Just really, really, really bad politics. But again, as a product, it's really fucking fun.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, I just want to enjoy a fun product. Mm-hmm. And as Tanner says at the very end here, if game developers can't get respect as artists, maybe they get some as product developers.
Yeah.
I think the heads of the directors of any COD game deserve that. And they deserve more. And if you don't want to say artist, say craftsman.
Sure.
There's a high level of craftsmanship in Call of Duty. There's a high level of craftsmanship in FIFA.
Yeah.
In Madden, in EA Sports,
College
Football 25. Yeah. So
yeah. So thanks for the addendum, Tanner.
Thanks for the addendum, Tanner. But Tucker, there's a video game that is actually just art.
There is. You're wrong. Art Academy on DS.
I thought you were gonna end the video for your bit again. Nah, I don't think that's gonna happen. All right. Yes, I see you recording. Yes, I see you farming and fucking post credits material. I know a farmer at work. You don't have to be wearing fucking overalls.
I did. I used to wear overalls at like middle school.
You actually do strike me as somebody who would wear overalls.
I used to wear overalls, and I had a rolly backpack.
Yeah, of course you had a rolly backpack.
I used to like play video game music from my iPad while I was walking in the hallways.
While you were walking in the hallways?
Yeah. Like Gusty Garden Galaxy. That was one of my favorites.
Okay. There's also a kid at our school who had a rolly backpack. People would say some real mean things about him.
Hey, guess what? You know what people say about me? Some real mean things.